Good morning. I'm not as nervous today, but I don't have my mom to help me when when I don't know the word in Spanish. But I have Christian, so thank you. This is a follow up of last Sunday's sermon, and I was talking about the desert being a place of restoration, and we know that the desert or a difficult terrain is always scary, and there is an opportunity to transform. But also, the desert is a place of restoration. We read in the New Testament that Jesus went to the desert to pray, spend time with God, and each time he would come out ready to face whatever would come afterwards. And I was reading my Bible, preparing myself for today, and I decided not to speak of the desert as a place of restoration. I'm going to talk about of the seeds in the desert. Last Sunday, I spoke of this three topics, this three highlighted these three things. God calls. It is our responsibility to answer like Moses did. Here I am. Second point was God guides. It is our responsibility to see God's guide. And we spoke about the cloud and the pillar of fire. And then also number three, point three, which is God provides. It is our responsibility to fulfill his commandments to receive the blessings of God. And we also talked about the quails and manna. Sometimes we may speak about all these things, be the calling, the guides us. God provides. There's people that are here or may not be here, or they might be through social media that may or may not hear me. They're not going to hear me, or they may not understand me. Jesus talks about of this dilemma, Matthew 13, verses 13, chapter 13, verses 1 through 9. And it says, talks about seeds. The same day, Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. But other fell into good ground, and brought forth fruit, some an hundredfold, and some 60-fold, and some 30-fold. He who hath ears to hear, let him hear. We can understand that. We can read it. You can hear. You can listen. You can hear me, but you cannot. There's people who won't understand. After that, the disciples, God, Jesus, they were walking with him, and they asked him, Jesus, Why do you speak in parables? We don't understand. Jesus was there making miracles, and they still wouldn't understand. To me, it's something funny. So I'm going to explain a little bit of this. And still, there will be people that won't understand, and that's fine. When someone is planting seeds, you need to place it on a ground where they could grow roots and let it grow. If I put it on here, like on top of this podium, nothing's going to happen. If you go to the store and buy those packet of seeds, and you can read the instruction, how much sun the plant needs, how often do we have to water the seeds, how deep are we supposed to plant it, how far should it be from another plant, so to have enough space to grow. There's instructions. It's not like, oh, I like it here, I'm going to put the seeds here. You could. You can try. It may not grow the root, and you may not grow. So there are instructions. Just as I said, there were commandments. There's also different animals that eat seeds. Like this garden. In my house, I have a garden, but this summer I didn't plant anything. We're fixing a few things. And sometimes I don't have something to protect my seeds. In my neighborhood, between the birds, those birds, those squirrels, my gosh, I hate those squirrels. The groundhogs, and the raccoons. And I have 8 chickens. Everybody, all these animals come in and eat. They always eat my seeds, and nothing grows. I'm so mad each time. I get mad every time. How can I protect it? How can I protect my seeds? So I have all these different animals and start eating everything. If I want something to grow, so I need to have good soil, and I have to put them in a place where they won't die because of over sun exposure or lack of sun. Also in a place, also depends on the temperature, climate, and then how much water they should get. Like if it's raining, that's when, like last night it rained, water, that's water for the soil. But if I come and I water it again, the seeds can drown. So if we're in July or August and the sun is very hot, very bright, I have to water them a little more. If not, the ground will be dried. There's no water for the plant to feed. The seeds or the roots that grow with it. Also, there's different types, different nutrients in the soil that the plant needs to grow strong. If I want a tomato plant, there are some things that the soil needs, that there are some nutrients the soil has that will help the tomatoes grow. I planted tomato plants. I only had like 3 tomatoes. Why? Why? Because the soil didn't have the right nutrients to grow more tomatoes. Do you understand? You following? Okay. I can do everything I need, and there are seeds that won't grow roots, or they may grow roots, but they won't grow. The example, tomatoes, the tomato plant I told you about. It could be that the sand that don't grow are seeds that are bad, didn't have the proper nutrients, or they won't stored properly. There's a process with the seeds to store them. That's a new word, okay? in Spanish, almacenar. There's a process to have them stored. If not, those seeds, without those seeds, won't grow. No matter where you put it, it's not going to grow if it's not stored properly. In Moses' story that I said in part in the Hebrew, and we understand that the God saved the Hebrews and also other people from other ethnicities. When they took him out of Egypt, that was part of their salvation. They had the opportunity. They had opportunity to help plant their seeds. Sorry, to grow their roots. So, as an example, of Moses, who was the one who was planting, he was guiding them. He was telling them in the name of God, look, don't complain. God will provide. But some of the people they had were hard. They were like thorny bushes. Their hearts were in their minds, in their hearts. They were where they were, as the Bible scripture says here, they fell on thorns. And sometimes they let the birds come up and ate the seeds. Part of being transformed is to change the soil in our heart and our mind to prepare ourselves for the seeds. There are times that they are seeds, and we have to let the seeds transform us. That means that when there are seeds and they're growing roots, there are times that we have to make difficult decisions. We have to we have friends that are like the birds. If there's a friend that I have and I'm trying to preparing myself, I'm praying, I'm trying to make this seed to grow roots in my mind and heart, will help me transform. And there's a person who I think is a friend of mine come in and start talking things. I was going to say, well, that's not right. If this person comes in my, foolishness, rubbish. Oh, look, that's not true. Well, that's just crap. Don't pay attention to that. That's nothing. In the Bible, it's just from a time, from an ancient time. Yeah, they don't have your best interest. That person is a bird that's gonna eat the seeds that the Lord is planting in my heart. I don't want that person in my life. Also, that means that when we are in a place we're being transformed, as we leave the seeds to let it transform our minds and hearts, that means we have to leave room or leave places or customs that grow thorns, which are not good for us. And that's not easy. Remember that the desert is not a diff, an easy place. It's difficult terrain. It's when we are being called and we're following God. We have to leave a lot of things behind: thoughts, friends, places, customs, so these seeds can grow roots. In the story of Moses and the Hebrews, I said that the Hebrews were complaining a lot. They had doubts that even though God was there, yeah, and talk to them. The Hebrews, some of them were not transformed. In Luke, there's a parable that talks about a wheat. Luke. So when the sower was planting the wheat, also weeds were coming up. In Luke, this parable that talks about, it says the root was on one side, the wheat was put it on one side, and the weed on the other side. And what happened to the weeds? He burnt it. We can see it. Now we can see this in the book of Numbers also, 11, verse 33. This is the story of Moses, the story of Moses and the Hebrews in Exodus, in Leviticus, and Numbers, and it continues. In this section, I tell you where the Hebrews were in the desert for 40 years, right? This is a lot of years after they left Egypt. Even though God fed them quails, thank you, and God was guiding them, they still had hardened hearts and complaining. And God and Moses were talking, and Moses, why did you bring me here? These aren't my babies. I didn't give them life. These people are my responsibility. And God was also mad. They were complaining because they wanted meat again. And God gave them quail. It's a story. You can read it and it's wow. And then when they were, even though it says the flesh yet between their teeth, it is said here, and while the flesh was yet between their teeth, here it was chewed. The wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. These people, Moses was the sower, even though the Hebrews and other people saw that God was with them, that God was guiding them, that God was providing. Even so, their hearts were still hardened. The seeds could not grow roots, could not grow. These seeds couldn't grow. So what did God do? Does so these people that have the plague were the bad weed, and God, in His anger, burnt them. When I read this, I was a little uncomfortable. How do we have a God that's could be loving? A God, how do we stand that God is loving, that He's nice, that God is all this, to say it. And right here, God is doing this other stuff. I was very uncomfortable. In this context, it's different. It's different. It's still applicable in our lives. When we're in the desert and God gives us seeds, we can let the we can let the seeds grow the roots and grow. But then there's people. They're gonna be like these people that they didn't want the seeds, nor they didn't want the seeds to grow roots. It is possible that they didn't know how to let the seeds sprout. When I was thinking about this and praying and preparing myself, I remembered I remember the story of the prodigal son. Last week, that God doesn't expect perfection from us. It's going to give each person seeds. And God expects that every person has a seed. Let those seeds grow. And sometimes those seeds will sprout and we will fail. We will alienate ourselves and we'll make bad decisions. But we understand that in the story of the prodigal son, for context, the prodigal son, to put it in context, the prodigal son grew up in a home who was very wealthy family. They had servants and they had everything that they had. And he had two children, the oldest and the youngest. The youngest wanted his inheritance to leave. He wanted to do whatever he wanted, and he left and spent everything, all of his inheritance. And he didn't have anything. He didn't have food. He didn't have money. He didn't have a place where to rest. Then finally, he was living and working in a pigsty. And this son was Hebrew, so they don't eat pork nor had animals or pets as a or pigs as pets. So he didn't have any dignity when he was thinking this. Why am I doing this? If my father has everything I need, why am I here? So he goes in St. Luke chapter 15, verses 20 to 24, and reads. This is the story. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet at a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in the sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoe on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He has lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. There's a lot of new words for me today. Even though we have the seeds and they sprout their roots, we would still fail. We will alienate ourselves and we will make bad decisions. But there's an opportunity to come back like the prodigal son. We can going back to God and say, God, I have sinned. I know I'm not worthy of you, but I want to live my life following you. Forgive me and help me transform for your will and glory. And God, like the Father, He will run to you, He will hold you, and will proceed to have a celebration because of you coming back home. To do that, it's not easy. In the desert, there's nothing that's easy. And like I said last week, God told us, God calls us told Moses and told each person that's here, and even though you're not here, through your through the thing, he will be with us throughout the way. When we distance ourselves from God, we have the opportunity to come back. The thing is that we cannot stay stuck. We need to see or realize when we're stuck and when we have to come back. Okay, that's it.